Well, let's turn our Bible to 1st, 2nd Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. I told you we're gonna start looking this morning on the life and teaching of Saint Paul. How many of you here knows Saint Paul? Okay. Well, we read of him, right? Okay. According to one centurion, he wrote something about Saint Paul. He's short, okay? So he's an apostle of short people. And then he has the long nose, typical of a Jewish person. And then he's bow-legged, sakang, you know. And because of the sufferings that he suffered, he's already, tawag natin sa Tagalog, bayukos. How do you call that? He's bent already when he walks. And then he walks a lot under the heat of the sun. He's bald. Okay? So he lost most of his hair. I still have a lot of my hair. Yeah. So Pastor Mars here looks more like the Apostle Paul than me. Oh, more so Brian, huh? There you go. And also they say that he's got a very stern face. Maybe because of his teachings. He said on one side, when you look at Paul, it looks like somebody who is a prophet that will come with thundering voice. But the centurion also wrote, you look at him on the other side, he looks like an angel who is ready to rescue anybody at their bidding. So as we start this new series, I'm not really sure yet how I will approach it, because I can approach it topically or just compare scriptures with scriptures. But it covers all of the writings of Paul. This is a story of someone that when we first encounter him, he should have been damned for eternity. Why? Because of the way he pursued the church. Paul was bent on destroying the church. Now, he is a religious zealot. He is a Pharisee of the Hasidic tradition. They believe in miracles. And Jesus said it when he was still here. He said, the time will come when men will persecute the church. Men will persecute you if you are following the scriptures. And they will try to murder you and put you in jail. And while doing it, thinking that they are doing it for God. And Jesus said, actually, they are doing it for their own selves and for the enemy. Paul's life turned around because of by a stroke of God's mercy. Now, that's been around 2,000 years ago. How many of you here knows somebody named Paul? Anybody? Nobody. You don't know somebody named Paul? Okay. You too. So now everybody knows somebody named Paul. Do you have a child here named Paul? Nobody. Okay. Paul is a very popular name today, right? He was killed by a person whose name is what? Who killed Paul? You see, you don't even know. Nero. Do you know anybody here named Nero? We name our children Paul. You know whom we name Nero? Our dogs. Right? So after 2,000 years, it seems like Paul had tons of influence. And Nero, nobody even want to name their children Nero. But Paul has an amazing change that took place in his life. Let's read what he wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old things passed away. Behold, new things have come. So many people interpret in so many ways. Some people with very unpleasant marriages said, well, all things are passed away, so they changed their spouses. Some people change their jobs. Some people change their careers because they say, all things are passed away. However, I think if we're going to interpret 2 Corinthians 5:17, we might as well look at it from the perspective of the one who wrote it. and that was Paul. When Paul said, all things are passed away, he was first of all looking at his life. The way Paul's life changed is his model, or what he meant by being born again. In a sense, Paul is saying, if you will look at me the way my life was, to the way that it is now, that is new birth. A 180 degrees turnaround. Now this is a powerful teaching of Paul, especially today that Christianity is being murky, and a host of teachings are being included in this one group of teachings that they call Christianity. Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship with God, that the moment it touches an individual, it changes the person to a 180-degree turn. And today when people come to the altar and profess they gave their lives to Jesus and then continue to live a life without a change, I'll tell you this, that is not born again, because new birth is all things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. And when we look at Paul, that is a turnaround. Paul did not change his wife. Why? Because he was never married in the first place. But what we saw is the change in the direction of his life. And so we can call Paul as a man for all ages. Have you heard of the phrase, man of the hour? What does it mean? I cannot interpret the thing. That's a bird talk, What do you call a man of the hour? Why is he called man of the hour? He's popular for 1 hour. Okay? And then there's what you call as man of the day. Why is he called man of the day? Popular for 1 day. And then you have man of the year. Who is the man of the year this year? Sits in there. Yeah, that guy who has no job right now. What is his name? The football player, right? Colin Kaepernick. Call him man of the year. So you lose your job, you become man of the year. But give it a couple of weeks, people will forget about him. And so whenever we talk about who is, they even I think lobby for man of the year with Times Magazine. During the times of Obama, there were other people that were candidates, and they made a big fuss out of it. How many man of the year do you remember in the first place? We forget them. However, when you look at Paul, you may call him as a man of the millennia, because for the last 2,000 years, people have never forgotten this man. Churches were named after him. Feasts were named after him. And different kinds of institutions were named after him. And so there was greatness in this person's life. Greatness was there already before he got born again. That same centurion who wrote about Paul said, if Paul did not get saved, or if he did not join the band of Christians, he would still have been popular today. But his name will be etched in human history as somebody who fought the Romans, probably staged rebellion against Rome for Israel, maybe wrote books on philosophy or whatever Jewish teaching there might be available. But they say that definitely this guy is going to do something in human history. And there is a reason for that, and we will be studying all of that in the process. But there are people who are raised to be great. Not that God doesn't want other people to be great, but there are some people who are raised right, and they are raised to be great. The Kennedys, for some people, they may not like them, but Joseph Kennedy, I think, set aside a trust of around $1 million each for his children. Then he talked to them and said, the reason for this trust is so that you can go to school and don't worry about how you're going to live for even a day. He said, you can go up to the PhD level and not worry about a thing. And he told his children, you know why I set aside this money for you guys? Now that is just a trust. It's not part of the inheritance. He said, so that you can devote your life to the service of your country. And that is what Joseph Kennedy told the Kennedys. And so when JFK was inaugurated as the first Roman Catholic president of the United States, they were bragging about the Kennedy dynasty. And they're saying, look how Joseph raised his family. During the time, the first Bush was also being inaugurated as a first-term congressman. And then he said, wait till you see what I'm going to do with my kids. And it turned out he produced another president and then a governor. And politically, they become a very influential dynasty as well. And so these are people that are intentionally being raised for greatness. Now, we are born again here if we have received Christ our Savior, and some of us have started our families already. Some are starting their families. Some are dreaming of having their own families. And the moment we begin to launch in this journey, or say as a church, we began as a church over 20 years ago, you have to ask yourself this question: what kind of family do you want to have? What kind of children do you want to have? Now, some are hallucinating that they're going to have great kids or that their kids are going to go somewhere. The reason why I say they are hallucinating is actually because they just leave this to chance. They claim that they are praying, but actually they are not because their actions doesn't match it. If you believe in raising children for greatness, to accomplish something, you have to raise them intentionally. Paul was raised like that. And so his greatness was meant since he was a little child. And the name of Paul, before he got born again, his Hebrew name is Saul, meaning desired. It's a very solical name. And so Paul, before being born again, was a very solical person, very carnal person. He's got a great dream, he's got a great will, and a great mind. But his spirit was dead. It was separated from God. So it never really tapped into real greatness. Our greatness and discovery of real identity only happens the moment we get born again. But even people who are born again doesn't achieve that. Why? Because they remain to be carnal. According to Paul in 1 Corinthians, he could not address the Corinthians as spirituals, but as carnals, because they are catering to their soul, they are catering to their whims, they are catering to their desires, to their carnal nature. And so if as Christians, we devote our lives catering to our carnal desires, it will not be raised for greatness in the kingdom of God. So it seems like Paul understood the meaning of true greatness in the sight of God. By the way, this is within the grasp of everyone. A lot of people are tired of their lives because they really don't know where it is going. A fellow minister in the Philippines, we were talking once, and I asked her, how did you end up being a minister? Because she was an evangelist during that time. And she said, because in my family, we run a business. And so she started thinking, why do we run a business? And so she said, well, to have more money. Why do we need more money? She said, to buy more things. Why do we need to buy more things? And she went on asking this question. And at the end, she got tired. She said, while thinking, I got tired. She said, if this is what life is all about, then she said, I don't like it. You know, for example, if you just devote yourself developing your career so that you can make more money for what? So that you can eat more. So when you eat more, you gain more weight. So that when you gain more weight, you have a reason to join the gym, spend more money to lose more weight. So you work harder so that you can pay for it, so that you can lose weight. Why? So that you can eat more and then gain more weight, and then lose more weight. That is a sick cycle. That is just a sick cycle. Because then you end up not accomplishing anything. My spiritual father, Lester Samuel, he brags, he said, I never spent a day of my life in a gym. He died over the age of close to 90, I think. But then he said, I never spent a day in a gym. Because he said, my life is dependent on the blessing of the Lord. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to go to a gym. My family has a gym membership. But what he was saying is, most people waste their lives on things without eternal reward or without eternal value. And so I think we have to steer our lives away from that and begin to live meaningful lives. Let's get introduced to Paul. We first see Paul in Acts chapter 7. Let's go to Acts chapter 7, verse 58. This is our first introduction of Paul. Persecution came to the body of Christ, a massive one, and the ringleader is Paul. In verse 58, when they had driven him out of the city, that is referring to Stephen, first martyr of the church, they began stoning him, and the witnesses laid aside their robes at the feet of a young man named Saul. The word began stoning him seems to point to a length of time spent in stoning Stephen. Most stoning victims don't die right away because when you are being stoned, the human nature is to protect himself. But they don't want the victim to protect themselves, so they normally tie their arms behind their back, and they don't want them to run, so they push them on the edge of a cliff because the person will be scared to jump off the cliff. So they'll put him at the edge of the cliff so that when they stone him, he will just endure the pain. And that will be most excruciatingly painful, given the fact that they normally don't aim for what will knock a person out right away. They will want you to suffer. Now, you cannot execute anybody during the Roman regime unless authorized by Rome. So Rome devised a system to authorize on-the-spot execution of a known convict. That is, there will be a witness, and those throwing stones will take off their coats or their blankets and put it at the feet of the witness. And so here, Paul was the witness, Saul was the witness. That witness is also the ringleader, because the ringleader will be the one to stand before the governor and say, the person is guilty, and so I order the execution, and here are the witnesses. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall a law be established. The Romans also require such measure. And so when Paul decided that he will be the witness, he decided he will be the ringleader. So, even if we don't like Paul, you can see greatness in Paul. Why? Because he felt that Orthodox Judaism was under attack. It was under assault from a group of people called Christians. And so he wanted to protect Judaism from being overtaken by Christianity. Some people may think it's mean. Not really. Look at what's happening right now in the U.S. They're trying to come up with anti-proselyting law. But Willie is telling me from his last trip that there were places they went to in Nepal that there are signs that says it is illegal to convert anybody to another religion. It is also illegal to pay somebody or to coerce somebody or to bribe somebody. So that means you can't go doing medical missions, giving blankets, giving food, and then evangelizing. Why? Because protecting one's religion has been part of the human nature. We have the Islamic groups. We have the Catholic groups that are desiring on non-proselyting law, especially the Islamists. You cannot just even badmouth Muhammad. they're willing to die for him. When we see this episode in the life of Paul, he was persecuting the church. He was putting even women in jail. Later we will read that. What we see is anger, hatred, and religious zealotry. All of this is a commitment to a cause. Now listen, you need to be committed to something. You need to believe something. A person who doesn't believe in anything will fall for anything. You need to commit your life to something. Otherwise, it will be committed to things that you may not like. You know, what are you committed to? Some people are committed to making wealth. Some people are committed to making a name for themselves. In some Asian countries, they want their family's name elevated. You will notice that in some of these not-for-profit organizations, for example, you will find in churches halls dedicated after a family name. The reason for that is because these people wanted to perpetuity. They wanted their names immortalized. One day, Northwestern University, there's their business school, Kellogg's Business School, received a very rich endowment. And they're going to more than double the building that they have downtown. I mean, more than double it. And so they were ready to remove the name Kellogg from, you know how this building, they have this little sign, maybe etched in stone or brass. So they were ready to remove that. When they were ready to remove that, their lawyer says, hold it, don't remove that. And they said, why? It turned out the donation of that building was made decades ago for over $20 million, but stipulated in that donation is you cannot remove the name Kellogg. If you remove the name Kellogg, the family can recall the donation with all the interests. By the way, that's how it's done. And so they almost changed the name because the current donation is over $100 million to extend the building. But why is it that people do that? Because they want their names remembered. Now, we also want people to think kindly of us. However, Paul, when he was carrying this out, he looks very angry. I mean, he was killing people. He was putting even women in jail, which was unheard of in those days. And so we can already tell, before he got born again, that Paul was a person of focus, determination, and when he sets himself out to execute something, he really does it. Now remember, the people that Paul was harming were innocent. We know they are Christians. They have no intention of hurting Paul. At least we could not read any of that. We don't know anything of what they said against him. These people practically did not touch Paul. If something, they blessed Paul because they kept praying for Jews. And so, in spite of all of the good things that the church was doing, unknowingly to Paul, Paul was still going after them. Now, remember that. Sometimes people will persecute you, not because you did anything wrong to them, but because they're just inspired by devils. And Paul was one of those. And so, he began to hurt them, and he began to try to destroy the church. This is also what we call as religiosity, or the bondage of religion. And so in Acts chapter 8, that's chapter 7, in Acts chapter 8, here we read again. And Saul began ravaging, in the King James Version, create havoc. And Saul began ravaging the church, entering house after house, and dragging off men and women. He would put them in prison. Therefore, those who had been scattered went about preaching the word. Now, this is both positive and negative. Why? Because Jesus already told the church, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always to the end of the age. That was the standing order of Christ to the church, for us to go. Say go. So, even if we like it or not, all of us here have this mandate to go and make sure that this gospel of the kingdom is preached. But you see, the moment a group begins to grow, they have that tendency to turn into a religion. It happens to everything, you know. And the moment it becomes a religion, it intends to perpetuate and enlarge itself. Then it will forget its mission to go. This is what happened to the New Testament church. We may call it as the first persecution, but we can also call it as the first wake-up call for the church. The church was just looking in Jerusalem. They were supposed to go to Judea, Samaria. Of course, there was a Samaritan evangelism, but that was even prepared for by Jesus earlier in John. But they were refusing to go. And so as a result, now remember in Job, God, nothing will happen to us unless the Lord permits it. And so now, if we can superimpose what happened to Job to what was happening in the church, the devil got permission from the Lord to persecute the church. And this time, the arm that was being used was Paul. You say, why will God allow that to happen? Because the church have refused to go. And the Bible says, because of persecution, those who had been scattered went about preaching the word. And the word preaching here is a unique word. It means gossip. They start gossiping the word. You know, when something is not allowed to be spoken on the housetop, you whisper it. You see, for example, right now, you cannot just go on the streets of the U.S. and then do street evangelism. You will be arrested for disturbing the public peace. In the Philippines, you can still do that, but I was told in this last trip that you can no longer just do that also. The neighbors can call the police now and stop you, because there's a lot of Christians now, a specific group in the Philippines, that they will go on the street, they will preach, and alongside they are collecting money. And so it's a money-making scheme, and somebody made a calculation. Boy, if you combine all the Christians all over the Philippines from one group that has the collection bucket that they distribute every day, they say they are hauling in tons of money every day. And people knew it. And so now we are being told not to do it anymore. But here, even though there was a prohibition, the Christians continued. They continued to gossip the gospel. You see, under intense persecution, they decided they are going to obey the Lord. Now listen, if we don't deliberately try to go, that is what happened. You study any church, when the membership of the church refuse to acknowledge the Great Commission, there is always something that can happen that the Lord will allow that will scatter the people and make them witness elsewhere. Now that happens in big churches, in little churches. Here, even close to home, there are tons of people who leave Bill Hybels' church. The churches around this area is very thankful for him. I have met one of the pastors there of a Methodist church, and I asked him, I said, it must be tough for you to be living under the shadow of, who's that guy? Bill Hybels. I just mentioned his name, forgot. And he said, no, we churches around Bill Hybels are very happy he's around. So I asked, why? He said, because those people, they always leave. And when they leave and they wanted to be discipled, they look for churches around Bill Hybels' area. And said, our growth had intensified since Bill Hybels was around. Because God intended that you and I continue to go. And I was mentioning last Friday, I believe that the Lord has called us. We may not know it when we first came here, as missionaries to this country. It was hidden from me also when I first came here. But then later on I began to see it. America is perhaps the biggest missions field in the world today. The biggest. It is no longer the Christian nation that we heard of when we were in the Philippines. Before, over 80% of missionaries come from the U.S. No more now. Before, over 90% of missions funding come from the U.S. No more now. Incidentally, the nations like South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore are financing a lot of global missions right now. Even mainland China and Hong Kong, they are financing a lot of. The Philippines is attempting to. Very little attempts, but even the Philippines, we are having missionaries to Vietnam, to Myanmar. I have some students back home that I was surprised. They are going to Myanmar on a regular basis. Why? Because they are open for missions. So I asked them, where are you getting your missions money? And they said, by faith, you know. They said they'll have money for transportation. They'll go to Myanmar or they'll go to other places. To Macau. A lot of Filipinos are in Macau. And we have some contacts there. And it is a gambling, it is a Las Vegas equivalent of the East. Remember in our history, the center of commerce and industry during the Spanish, Portuguese time was Macau in China and Manila in the Philippines. These were the two centers. And so Macau it continued to be that. It is a gambling capital in that part of the world. But there's a lot of Filipinos there, workers. And there is a call there for us to go. I think for 5,000 pesos from the Philippines, you can buy a ticket to Macau. And so Filipinos are going there holding conferences, but it's being left to that. But here, world mission becomes a necessity. And U.S. is now one of the biggest, if not the biggest, missions field in the world. And we are already here, you know. Your sphere of influence is not an accident. It is by divine appointment. Some of you students, you go to school, you never even left a mark. People don't even know you are Christians. Some of you who works in hospitals, in schools, in other companies, nobody even know you are a Christian. I'll tell you this now, that is a shame. Because people need to know that you have the gospel, that you have the message. If you go to a place and people don't even realize you're a Christian because you're just like them, that is an embarrassment. And that is a reason why Christianity is no longer as effective as it should be. But here, the church have realized that they can use the spreading as an opportunity. Chinese are number one, but perhaps Mexicans and Filipinos comes in close second, you know. We are all over the place. You know, in Israel, Brother Will and I were laughing. We went to this place, and Brother Will and I were surprised. Says, wow, these are Mexicans. They're talking like Mexicans. And so, you know, Filipinos, we know some Spanish words, so we greeted them, and this guy was very happy. But the Americans that we were with, they don't like them, you know. And they were serving falafel, and it has different kinds of ingredients in there, and you can only choose one. I think they have three options. You can only choose one. But Willie and I, we started talking to these guys, and we started laughing. And when we went to the table to eat, the Americans were wondering, they have one. We have three, you know. The Mexicans did as well. They're all over the place. They're digging. They are helping. Filipinos there are maids. The Jews like us because we can speak English, and they can celebrate their Sabbath because we can cook. And so I'm telling you, by this event of looking for a job, a lot of Filipino Christians, a lot of Chinese, a lot of Mexicans, a lot of third world countries, immigrants are all over the world. And a lot of them are Christians. And so whereas before they could not think about being deployed by God overseas to bring the gospel, we are now deployed. I never, to be honest, I never thought I would pastor a church in the U.S. It was very far from my mind. If God spoke to me over 20 years ago that I will do that, I would probably think it was not God. Because I look at America very high. Because most of my professors in the Bible college are Americans. The books that I read on biblical studies and theology are written by Americans. The missionary who brought the gospel to the Philippines are Americans. And so you kind of respect them. And I never thought that this country will go down like this, that it will lose its Judeo-Christian moorings. That's why God sending people here. You know, the only reason why this country is still majority conservative? The Mexican immigrants. Because most of them, when they come here, they are Catholics. And Catholics are predominantly conservative. That is the only reason why this country is still considered conservative. It's no longer because of the people being born here. The moment they're born here, they get corrupted, you know. That's why, guys, I think we have to change the way we think. This country needs us now by way of evangelism. And so you cannot keep hiding yourself as Christians in your schools, in your workplaces, in your neighborhoods. I can't even get an amen there. You know, you are missionaries deployed wherever you are. Now, if you have lost your witness because you live just like them, talk just like them, behave just like them, that is a shame. You cannot prove anymore what new birth is. That's why you have to come to the cross, repent of your sins, and begin to ask the Lord for mercy. So Paul's life turned around when he was on his way to, after chapter 7, chapter 8. Needless to say, when somebody began to camp on persecuting the church, some people lose their faith. Now, the Bible does not, Book of Acts does not mention it loudly, but you can see it in Acts. Some people begin to lose their faith also. When persecution takes place, what you are made out of, when pressure comes into your life, what you are made out of will come out, not what you say you are. Okay, I can brag and say I can lift 500 pounds. You know, I can brag like that. I'm 200 pounds right now, almost, and so I can perhaps say, well, I can deadlift 500 pounds. And you cannot prove whether I'm right or wrong because I'm not doing any deadlift right now. The test is when a 500-pound weight is upon me. What am I going to do with it? You know? Meaning, you will know who you are and what you are made out of the moment pressure comes into your life. And pressure will come. And so when pressure came to the church, some people backslid. Peter, John, and James spoke about it in their epistles. However, we also know that Paul was persecuting a very young church. It was newly born again. It was newly founded. It was not even 60 AD. And so you're not even talking 10, 20 years here. It's a very young church. And it went through a massive persecution. And some lose their faith. Just look at the disciples of Jesus while Jesus was still alive. Jesus was just teaching a simple truth. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, which is a metaphor, you have no part in me. Most everybody left. Just backslid. The moment the priestly family starts spitting out threats and persecution against those who follow Jesus, some of his followers left, one after the other. Those people who left were the ones that Jesus healed, Jesus saved, Jesus forgave. I mean, some of them Jesus raised from the dead. For goodness sake, I don't know where those people are that Jesus raised from the dead. I mean, they should be witnessing, even for example, if we say that Jesus was tried during the night, the following morning, the trial continued. Those people that Jesus raised from dead should have been up there. I don't even know where Lazarus was, because Lazarus died much later. I don't even know where Lazarus was. But the moment pressure comes in, forget the blessings. People forget what kind of things the Lord did for them. And so they just joined the band. Why? Because they turned cowards. When your life is not founded properly, under pressure, a lot of people will give up what they believe. Just look at how much we change our doctrines today by simple threats. I told you about the Church of Satan because those bakers in Colorado lost the case. The Church of Satan announced to its members, find every Christian baker that you can find and demand that they bake a cake for Satan. Because they knew that the Christians who are strong will say no. Because he wants to sue all of them. And he knew there's already a precedent, they will all lose. And if they will all lose, Christians will lose money. Christianity right now is being challenged at the front door. They are no longer at the back door. They are no longer under the table. At the front door, our faith is being challenged. And so a lot of people are beginning to lose their faith because of this. Now, Jesus did something about the situation. The young church was suffering, and so the leaders of the church were not equipped to handle Paul. I would like to say that. Peter was not equipped. He doesn't know how to handle Paul. John doesn't know how to handle Paul. And so in times like that, Jesus himself handled the situation. So now let's go to Acts chapter 9, starting on verse 1. Now Saul was breathing threats and murder against the disciples. Earlier, he was putting them to jail. The moment evil begins, it doesn't continue on the same frequency. Evil will continue to be more evil. Okay? You can imagine Paul started by debating Christians in a temple. Then he started putting them in jail. Then he got a letter of authority. Then he wants to murder them. That is evil. If you think that, sometimes we surrender. We have disobedient children and we say, oh, they learned their lesson already, they will stop there. You are so foolish. They will never stop there. The nature of evil is not like that. The nature of evil is not like that. Evil is after it has done this, it will do something worse. It will keep doing something worse. Come on, guys. If you don't understand this, you are blind. The homosexual lifestyle is being pushed in the Philippines. And remember years ago, we announced to you that there was a legislation wherein marriage will be contractual, renewable every 2 years. That's one of the worst law. Philippines keeps coming up with stupid laws, I mean, first we have the squatters law. Now, 2 years ago, they came up with marriage contract law, wherein marriage is renewable every 2 years. If you don't renew it, it expires. It's like a warranty, you have to renew it. Well, it didn't pass, but they are pushing it again. Now, there's a greater support now. They are pushing it again. They changed the name, but eventually this will just turn into a civil union. Marriage will just be turning into a civil union. Well, it's not really a marriage; it's just a contract, And I was counseling a couple, and they're about to be married. I discontinued counseling them because, of course, I left. But I asked the guy, are you excited? I said, you're about to be married. He said, yes. And so I looked at the lady, and I said, are you excited to be called Mrs., let's just say X, Miss X? And the guy answered and says, no. I said, what do you mean? He said, Pastor Jose, she doesn't need to take my name now. I said, what do you mean? He said, I don't care. So now what's happening in America, wherein some women, they are already married, they retain the name of their how do you call this? Their maiden name. I forgot how they call it. They retain their maiden name. It's happening in the Philippines now also. Things are changing. And so, in all of this, your character is in question. So now, Saul is still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest, asked for letters from him to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, that's how the church was called, the way, both men and women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. As he was traveling, it happened that he was approaching Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him, and he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and it will be told you what you must do. Now Jesus said this, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Gates of hell, the council of hell. Now we know what gates are in the Old Testament. Gates are where government makes decisions, where contracts are signed, where armies march in and out to fight, in after the fight. The kings meet, the high priest meet, everybody by the gate. It's the center of decision making. Now, incidentally, in the New Testament, the center of decision making for the Jewish life is called the Sanhedrin court. Okay? It's composed of, I forgot, I think 70 or 120 elders. It's the same number that the Israeli assembly, the Knesset, has right now. And so when it says the gates of Hades will not prevail against, this is literally the gates of Hades. When a group of people gathers together and discuss how to destroy the church, that is the gate of hell. Okay? It's when people counsel, how are we going to destroy it? That's the gates of hell. Now, sometimes you would like to think of other hell, but in context, whenever a group decides to plan and say, we are going to destroy the church, that's the gate of hell. And the Bible says, the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And so when the enemy decide to plan against you to demolish your faith, if you stand on what you believe, the gates or the council of hell will not prevail against it. Now, in the case of the church, Paul was sent. Paul was at the center of that gate, and he secured the letter from the Sanhedrin court, from the high priest. Secured the letter to murder the Christians. Jesus always said, that will not prevail. Now, Peter perhaps was not ready to face Paul, nor anybody else. So Jesus himself marched down from heaven and faced Paul. And Paul realized he's no match to Jesus. And so that is how we were introduced to Paul in the book of Acts. After that, he became a missionary, traveling up to Asia Minor. He went to Rome. He went to some parts of Greece. Some people think he went to Babylonia. I am not sure about that. But Paul became tireless. The last time we saw him before born again, he was tireless in pursuing the church. The next chapter was his tireless effort to spread the gospel. Now, that is born again. Okay, that is born again. Are you born again? Okay. The moment you say you receive the Lord as your Savior and claim new birth, all things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. In context, you are talking about Paul. He was the one who wrote that when he said, if any man be in Christ, as I am. Okay? He is a new creature, a new species that never existed before. That's what it means. All things are passed away. What he was saying is, look at my life. My old life is gone. Behold, all things have become new. Now, later on, we'll study that Paul was addicted to power, addicted to a lot of things. All of that gone. He came from a well-to-do family. All of that gone. the guy was born again. Now, it will be very difficult for me to look at a person and that person claim, I am born again. And yet, when I look at that person's life, nothing changed from the day he got born again to the day after being born again. No change in lifestyle. That is very difficult to see. Because when Paul says, all things are passed away, they really passed away. And Paul was modeling himself. So, let's look at some of the things that Paul walked away from. That is additional background. First of all, in Acts 23, verses 6, Paul was a very devout and religious person. He was a religious person. When we talk about spirituality, some people equate with religiosity. They are two totally different things. Acts 2:23, verse 6. But perceiving that one group were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, Paul began crying out in the council, Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial for the hope and resurrection of the dead. King James says, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. Now what does that passage tells us about Paul? In his veins flow religion. You know, some Catholic says, I am born a Catholic, I'm going to die a Catholic. That was Paul. Some Baptist says, I am a Baptist of Baptists. That was Paul. Some people say, I'm a fundamentalist of fundamentalists. That was Paul. The moment your allegiance is already on a religion, not on a person of Jesus Christ, that is, you become religious. You know. When the Jews began in their faith, their allegiance is the Torah, to Jehovah. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. That's Judaism. You shall meditate on the word day and night. That's Judaism. You shall keep all the law. That's Judaism. Your allegiance is to the Lord and to the word. But the moment that allegiance turns to a religion, then from being spiritual, you become religious. The Pharisees were orthodox. They were conservatives. They observed the laws of Moses strictly. Now, just think how blessed Paul was. Paul was born in a Jewish family. He did not grow up wondering whether there is more than one God. He grew up believing there is only one God. He doesn't have to wander through so many manuscripts wondering what is the value of that to his spirituality. He's got that Torah. That's all he has. You know, Christians don't realize it, but there is a certain blessing to being born in a real Christian family. I wasn't born in a Christian family. You know, my grandmother was a very devout Roman Catholic. My parents were average, maybe less than average. And so I was born in a Roman Catholic family. I rarely go to church. It wasn't something that we were raised in. I envy the people who were born in a Christian family. One day there's this guy named Paul Olson. He was a Polish evangelist. And he talks about his dad being a Lutheran, his mom being a Lutheran, his dad a pastor. And he talked about his mom praying for him to the day she died. And he talked about how he saw the glory of God when his mom died. And he said in our church in the Philippines, he said, I thank God for my Christian heritage. I was listening to him preach and I says, oh man, I don't have a Christian heritage. I don't have that. You know, Hansel can claim that his parents are born again, he's raised in a Christian family. I cannot claim that. My kids can claim they are raised in a Christian family. I cannot claim that. I don't know how many of you can claim you are born in a Christian family. I learned it the hard way. You know, I was born believing that I can pray to the saints, that there is more than one way to heaven. I was growing up not knowing whether I am going to heaven or not. But my inclination is, I was not going to go to heaven. I mean, at least where I grew up, we were all preparing for indefinite tenure in the purgatory, you know. We're looking for means to pay the priest so that they can say a mass, so that the fires of hell will continue to diminish if we go to purgatory. That was an awful preparation. I don't have a good Christian heritage. Paul has that. Listen, the greatest heritage that any person can have is a faith heritage. Because we grew up poor, my parents were pushing us to finish our studies. No matter if it's just high school, they don't have dreams of us going to college. I was the first college graduate in our family. Not my image, but my whole clan. I was the first college graduate. After me, my sister graduated, and then the other people graduated. But to my knowledge, I was the first college graduate. That was a bad background, you know. Now, but my father will always say, we cannot leave you any money because we're poor. So your greatest inheritance from us is your education. Because they were not born again. Okay? Some parents think today if they can prepare financially for their kids, that they have lived well. That is a fallacy. The Walgreens left their kids a multi-billion-dollar business. I've read that all the Walgreens kids are into drugs. Ironically, they are in the drug business, you know, selling drugs. They are into drugs. And so the Walgreens business is no longer owned by the Walgreens. It's a corporation. It's a publicly traded corporation now. Because the Walgreens cannot handle the money. You see? Incidentally, I've also read that two of the richest women are from Walmart. What's the other thing of Walmart? There's another store tied up with Walmart. Sam's Club. They're, I think, two of the top 10 richest women in the world. They came from Christian origin also. You see. The greatest inheritance that you guys can leave to your children is your faith. I mean, unless I'm totally wrong, I don't know any millionaire in this room here. You know. Maybe we are millionaires in yen, huh? but not in dollars. Maybe we can gather a couple of millions in pesos. But that is not that much. You know. If we think that buying an insurance will give our children a great future, you are wrong. Because we have seen that. Kids, the parents die, and then they're left with a property. They sell it right away. Man! Sell it for, $100,000, perhaps 2 or 3 kids. So they have 50 or 30,000 grand each. And they think it's a lot of money. That is not that much. So maybe get a vacation in the Philippines and find out that can easily be spent in a week's time or less. And people think that's the greatest heritage. The greatest heritage that we can leave to our children is our faith. Because the moment that faith is passed on, then you give them a foundation like a rock that our children can always go back to and learn from. However, the moment it turned into religion, he said, a Pharisee of Pharisees, he's got wealth and everything else. However, if you become like Paul, a religious zealot, you know, he started trying to kill Christians. Now listen, religion is a killer. That's how you know whether a person, one of the tests, how you know a person has become religious. Okay. The moment you start thinking of destroying someone, you have become religious. The moment you have no longer regard for the faith of the community, you have become religious. And this is what Paul had become. Religion is a killer. You say, no, that's just for the Jews. No. Have you heard of the guy named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini? You know how many millions of people he had killed, that religious leader? To this day, Iran is a theocracy. And you can't go against the will of the Ayatollah. They'll just kill you. Religion is murderous. Have you heard of the religion called Islam? A journalist from England, I think, drew a caricature, wrote a book, Satan's something. And they put out a price on his head. That is what religion will do. Religion is a killer. Just think of the zealots today. They really think that they're doing it for God. That is what religion does. Religion without Jesus can be a killer. Most of the trouble that the church have is not coming from governments or outside personalities. Most of the church problems are coming from within, from people who have become religious. Look at the Roman Catholic Church. Perhaps one of the most conservative groups that we have today. Pope Benedict was a very conservative pope. He began to feel pressure from the Roman hierarchy. He resigned. I think the first pope who ever resigned. He resigned. And they elected somebody from Central America. Why Central America? Because Central America is the birth of liberalism. And so they thought, if we will vote somebody from Central America, it will appease the Roman Catholics globally. They were right, it did. But now this Pope has the inkling to approve same-sex marriage. The guy is very liberal. He has an inkling to approve a lot of things which conservative Roman Catholicism will never approve. Okay? And so this is what religion does. It will kill not only people, it loses its focus. Our focus is on Jesus. Our focus is on our relationship with God. The moment your focus is no longer in Jesus, listen to me, you have become religious. You know. The moment, and you have to arrest that, the moment your focus is no longer on your relationship with God, you have become religious. If your focus turns on people, if your focus turns on a group, if your focus turns into a religion, you have become religious. The example of Paul is this. He was religious. Jesus turned his life around. He became spiritual. Before Jesus, he was just building religion. After Jesus, he's building the church. Before Jesus, he was no longer just studying the Torah. He was into politics. He was into all kinds of things. But now he's back with the gospel, which he was not ashamed of, which he felt indebted to. I think for a lot of the members of Lion's Heart, we have to examine our hearts whether we have turned religious or not. Because I'll tell you this, if we have lost the zeal of going, if we have lost the zeal of witnessing, of sharing our faith, we have become religious. If we think that coming to this church every Sunday and every Friday is enough to make you please God, you have become religious. Are you here? You have to realize that Christianity, coming to church, is the easiest thing. Living it out outside this church is the most difficult thing. Do not think that coming inside this building will erase what you do outside of this building. If you think that way, you have become religious. And religion will kill your spirituality. Like Paul, it's about time to reclaim that message of new birth. All things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Amen? Let's all stand.